If you don't use it, you lose it. Like, we know that's kind of the way with fat adaptation and carbohydrate utilization, but perhaps it's that way with protein too. If you slow down on your protein consumption or you don't increase it as you age, perhaps you become metabolically inflexible at utilizing that protein. A new study from PLOS-ONE takes a look at this and it demonstrates it pretty well. It doesn't come right out and say that, but the researchers do even make a mention within the study that it's similar to the metabolic inflexibility that we see in other categories. Let's break it on down. Hey, after this video, I do want you to check out my friends over at 4505 Pork Rinds. Okay, if you are doing intermittent fasting or keto or anything like that, and you really enjoy good quality pork rinds, you've gotta check them out, okay? I usually get them at Costco, and I wanna shout them out at Costco. So go ahead and check them out at Costco. You can get big old bags of them. They really pay attention to the quality when it comes down to the meat. Humanely raised without added antibiotics. Fried pork skins, salt, a little bit of coconut palm sugar, but we're talking not even enough to move the needle on the carbohydrate. We're talking such a small amount. Okay, that is one thing that I love most about them. If you usually look at the ingredient label on most pork rinds, you're gonna see maltodextrin, you're gonna see monosodium glutamate, you're gonna see yeast extract, you're gonna see all kinds of weird things in there, not only as preservatives, but as flavor enhancers. But when you look at 4505, the list is simple, easy to decipher, and the first ingredient is exactly what you want to see. You want to see fried pork skins in that given situation. So check them out at Costco. I also put a link down below if you want to check them out on Amazon as well if you don't have a Costco nearby. But give them some support at Costco so that Costco stores continue to keep them in there. And a big thank you to 4505 for the support on this channel as well. So the journal PLOS-ONE published this study. Okay, it was a 5-year study. They looked at things over a 5-year period of time. And they took a look at 2 separate groups of 2 age differences. So one group was like a younger average age of like 22, and the other side was like an older average age of like 70-ish, okay? And they measured what's called the post-absorptive phase. They measured how much protein they would synthesize post-absorptive, like after the protein was actually inside the tissue. Okay, the other group was also a young group and an old group, okay, over the course of 5 years, and they measured postprandial protein synthesis, like how much protein they would absorb after a meal. Here's what's super intriguing, okay? The post-absorptive phase, the young group and the old group was the same, showing that once the protein is in the tissue, protein synthesis is more or less about the same between a young person and an old person. Now, most evidence shows us that older people don't synthesize protein as well. So what gives? Well, when you get down to the brass tacks of actual protein synthesis inside the tissue, protein synthesis is about the same. But when you look at the other group that looked at postprandial, which is after eating, 16% less in the older group. Okay, that indicates that the older group doesn't utilize as much protein after a meal. So once it's in the tissue, the protein synthesis is the same. But if you measure the big picture after what they're actually extracting from food and what they're actually utilizing, it's 16% less. They also found that younger people were 3 times more responsive to the protein that they would consume compared to older people. Well, what does this have to do with metabolic flexibility? Okay, well, researchers kind of likened it to that because think about this. As we get older, we become less metabolically flexible in the world of glucose. Okay, we see the instance of diabetes increasing like just tremendously as people get older because there's more damage, less ability to receive that glucose, less ability to manage it and properly utilize it. So blood glucose goes higher, instances of type 2 diabetes go higher. That's a problem, right? Okay, but we're only looking at it in the world of glucose. We don't look at it in the world of protein. Now, they could be synergistic and working hand in hand because carbohydrates and protein in a lot of ways do facilitate the absorption of each other, or at least carbohydrates facilitate some of the absorption of, protein. But anyway, my point with this is that this study started to allude to the fact that as we get older, we do need to make sure that we are increasing protein consistently and constantly making sure that we are developing the mitochondrial machinery to process and utilize protein. Because believe it or not, as we get older, mitochondrial DNA decreases. So when the mitochondrial DNA decreases, we are encoding less mitochondrial proteins that can allow us to, well, get benefit out of the protein. So we need to consistently be able to feed ourselves more protein consistently as we get older so we don't become metabolically inflexible. If you don't use it, you do lose it. So as you get older, if you go through periods of time where you say, I'm going to reduce my protein intake because I'm concerned about consuming too much protein. It's going to be bad for me or whatever. You could be hindering your body's ability to synthesize that protein as well. So maybe a lot of the issue that we run into in terms of being metabolically inflexible with protein comes from the fact that as we get older, we naturally start to decrease our protein intake. 15 to 38% of men don't even get enough protein to meet the recommended daily allowance, okay? And up to 41% of women don't get that amount. So we're already seeing that as we get older, we just consume less protein. It's just kind of, a lot of times we consume less calories in general. And we're making ourselves potentially metabolically inflexible. I mean, a lot of this is hypothetical in the sense that we're extrapolating data from studies, but it makes perfect sense, right? In order to be able to take the protein and facilitate muscle growth with it, we need to be accustomed to that. We also have to have a stimulus, right? If we don't have a stimulus in terms of weight training, or if we don't have a stimulus in terms of exercise and cardio, then what the heck is the drive to actually synthesize protein? So it becomes increasingly more important, just like it is with carbohydrates. If we want to remain flexible to be able to utilize carbohydrates and not have spillover and not have high blood glucose levels, what do? We are responsible with our carbohydrates, and we allow our body to utilize them now and then, but we also exercise so our body can utilize those carbohydrates. Well, same thing with protein. We consistently increase our protein, and we consistently have a stimulus that allows us to need that protein. And what are the two things that we generally do when we get older? We decrease the amount of exercise that we do in our activity, and we also decrease the amount of protein. If you don't use it, you lose it, period. I'll see you tomorrow.